Hi design thinkers, my name is Matthew Sear and today we are going to be getting into part 2 of our Figma variable tutorial with setting up dynamic variables. We're going to set up our own max and min values inside our variable collection, and we're going to start applying them to our assets, setting up those max and min parameters. So let's jump into the video. Just before we jump into the video, wanted to introduce you to the Variable Toolkit. It's a plugin I've been working on for some time now, and now we are releasing the beta. So if you would love to jump on board, provide your comments, feedback, and be involved, then the link for the beta testing is in the description box below. The Variable Toolkit is a quick and easy toolkit to apply variables directly from your asset panel down here right to your asset without going through tedious drop-down menus back and forth. Without further ado, let's jump in the video. All right, here I am back inside of Figma. This is the PixelLink token size kit, and we went through in the last video where we ended up getting the spacing, dynamic spacing going. Now we had this where it would adapt to the different screens, and the spacing adapts as well, which is really cool. Now we can actually start looking at how we can put some max and min controls inside of this, because even for this here, like if I was to make sure that, let's say, my buttons will adapt to the drawer, I can just drag that drawer all the way out and it will stretch the item all the way across, and it's not what I want at all. So what I'd like is to make sure that there is a particular range that allows for this. I also want to control like what text that I can put into the buttons and the range of the text that I can put into those buttons. And I'd like to know also how to control for the layouts inside of my screen and how those layouts basically will adapt and respond to different size screens. Now, I already have my more, like, I guess, a little more advanced way of setting up these parameters. Let's have a look at that, and then we will jump right into the max and min scaling. Over here, what I have is I've got a maximum size control set. In my maximum size control set, I put in all of the most commonly used max size or min size values that I use, at least. And these can be whatever values you use. In the end, you just need enough values that works for you. These are the ones that I use, and what I add in is a little identifier to identify the max and min for these, so it's easier for me to search for them. If I was, for example, wanting to find, let's say, my max sizes, I can actually go add variable and I can actually add in this to find that set, which makes life a lot easier than having to scroll through endless numbers. I also have this boundless value, and the boundless value is really important. I'll probably show you in the latter part of the video, but just so you understand, the boundless value, you're going to have a boundless max and you're going to have a boundless minimum. And I put my boundless values inside of my size set. This is the set that I release across my projects that is accessible. And in my actual set, I have a ungodly value for my maximum because you can't put infinite, and for my min I put my 0 which means that there's no minimum. I guess 0 is the minimum. You can't go into negative values, which is in some cases sometimes actually quite helpful. Now that I have those, I can basically start setting up the ways that I can control for those max and min values on my assets. If you want, I'm going to give you just a moment. Feel free to either create this table and write it out. You'll need 2 tables, one's max, one's min. You'll need the balance values attached. And ideally you could go with this whole scale. If you've done that, you're pretty much ready to go, but don't worry, I'm going to create a very small version of this table just to illustrate the point of what this does and how it works inside of the demo. Let's get started. Now, this max and min bound, I'm going to specifically be building it for the control of the way that this will work. I do, for example, know that at a point of time this will scale out, and then what I want it to do is like what we have. You see when it adjusts over here, it will adjust to a different screen and it will perform differently. The max and min values will need a control for the fact that the buttons can't do this, and the max and min button and the max and mins are there to control so that we don't have text that can just endlessly go on forever. To do all of these kind of controls, we need to actually set controls, and we need controls to define basically the limits or the minimums of what these can be. I have minimums for the text size, I have maximums for the text size, and I can also even do that on buttons, and I can do that as well on any part of my asset. This is really powerful. Anyway, what we can do is first off figure out what would be a maximum and a minimum. Let's have a look at, let's say, just this text here. I have a button, I put button, that's all nice, but I'm curious, how many actual like text basically pieces do I need until it actually breaks? So I'm going to use zeros, but I'm going to count them. I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think 8's about there. 9, maybe 9's pushing it. And once I hit 9, I'm outside the bounds there. So it seems to be that my value for this would be 8. So if 8 was the value of how many text pieces that we could roughly have inside of here, let's understand what actual size that is. Here is the width is 62. So 62 would be one of my max widths. Ideally, you want to have something that's a little bit, you don't want to have like hundreds upon thousands of variations of this. Ideally, you just want to have a couple of consistent ones across the whole system. But 62 seems okay. I'd probably go for a 64 just to round it off to a rule of 4 number. So one of them is going to be my 64. Now I have my buttons over here. If I was to also, for example, I'm just going to grab that text string and add them in there, I'm like, that's okay. But in this scenario, maybe I'm okay to even have a little bit more than this. Maybe I if we're switching 1 to 1, we'll probably keep it at the same there. Let's keep it at the same. That's a 93 in width. And what we can do is we'll grab this out. Let's just say that'll be a 96. And so we'll have basically our 64, 96 for the button. And obviously we have this screen, and this screen has a 1920 by 1080. So there's two other values there. So we've got a 1920, and then we also have a 1080. That would be for one of our screen sizes. Our other screen size here, we end up having 360 by 800. So that could be another one that we could have. So we'll do that 360 by 800. And if 800 was the minimum width, that's all good. And if this was basically the maximum width and height, then that's also all good. Overall, we've got something for our text and we got something for our screen controls. I'm not going to build out the rest, but we can build out these. So if you've done this table, like the big table, fantastic. This is going to be a lot easier. But if you haven't, that's okay. It's just these are just a couple of smaller values. So we're going to start making one of the actual collections. We'll create a new collection. And this one is going to be my maximum. Now inside my maximum, I need my values. So let's create my values. I will have the 64 as one of the values, which will have the 64. I will then duplicate that one. I will then add my 96, being obviously 96. I will then duplicate that again. I will then make my 360. I will then duplicate it again. I will create my 800 and duplicate it again and create my 1080 and then also continue and duplicate it again and 1920. So these values will basically be defining the maximum. The good thing is we can basically create the same table again, but create the actual minimum size. And it's important to have them separate because we also want to make sure that our boundless controls are separate too. So or yeah, I guess you could also loop in the boundless control in here in the way that you want it. I would recommend them to be separate though. There we go. And this one will be the size. And this will be my boundless. Now, For this table, I'm not going to go creating that other like actual value, but in the boundless for maximum, we're just going to put in a very big number in all of our boundless parts of the table. What it means is that if you do want to have it boundless, it will have a maximum size, it just will be very big, and that's okay. And for this, unfortunately, we cannot have any particular way at this time in Figma to basically duplicate this table. That being said, there is a plugin we can actually use, or to just attempt to get around this, is this one, where I can, let's say I'll just export the max table out, and I will do that. I will import the max table again, and here we go. I have now two max tables. I'm going to go to the other max table, and it's going to turn it into the minimum table. Or you just write this all out again. And there we go. The one difference is the minimum table, the boundless value is 0. And when I say it's handy being 0, it means that you're never getting to negative values, which is really good, because at some times in some screens, Figma gets a little bit janky and then ends up throwing some of your designs into a negative, and if it does that, it won't happen because it can't. So that's nice. So I've set up my max, I've set up my min, and I have my boundless set up, so everything is good. All I need to do now is just apply it to my assets. I'm going to select, so I'm going to go to my button here, and I'll make sure we have this, and I'm just going to make sure that's reset. Because this is a component in components, which is fantastic, I can actually do a little thing with this text. I can go here, and I can actually truncate my text, and I can also truncate this text too, which means if it goes beyond the actual controlled value, it will add a couple of dots there. It means that people can't break it, which is great. Got to love not being able to break your own things or have others do that. So I have my button. I can now apply my 96 on my max. So I go to width, and I can go add max width and click that again, and then I can go apply, and then I can apply my new max value, which was 96. And then I can go down here, and I can also go and apply we want to go max value, and I want to also apply that, and then go and apply the 64. So now I have my min, I have my max, which is fantastic. As you can see though, let's say I have maybe one letter button. See how the button here gets like very small? I don't really want the button to do that. I'm happy with the button to basically sit out and stay further out. I don't really mind if it doesn't recognize the text block or not. So that's where we can set up that kind of minimum range on our button. So let's go to the button itself, and let's add some minimum and maximum values. We even may need to even add another one in here. I might even do so. So let's drag this out a little bit more. And what I'm going to do is I'm drag out the button, and I'm actually going to set this button to instead of doing that, I'm going to get it to sit there. I'm happy to add in a little bit more. I'm still using that dynamic scaling token that we have, which is nice. And here I got something around that range, which is okay. I think I'm going to go 4 multiplied by 2 and minus 32. All right. Let's say that it's the 24. So go in, back in local variables. I'll add one more into my min and max. And when with the min, we do want to change that around as well, just so that we have clear identifiers for our max and for our min. These things are really helpful, I have to admit, like setting them up and using them to quickly access the actual sets that you want. That being said, ideally you shouldn't, it would be nice not to, you know, it is what it is. And we grab that value, max, add in our max. Beautiful. Cool. There we go. So over here, I can actually now go to my width, add in my max, and add in that value. And I can go over to my width again, and I could actually add in a minimum value. So that's up to me if I want to go smaller than this. And yeah, we could totally do that. Let's add in a minimum. Let's just make sure that it doesn't go any smaller than the text. Ideally, actually, you know what? We could just, I think what we do is we just switch it. The minimum value is that value instead. So let's just go back here. Instead, let's add in that as the minimum and we won't, for a maximum, let's allow it to go up to 160. Probably not, but let's just allow that to take place. So if I was to go in here, I was press enter, and I want to make sure that fills the container that it's in. It will eventually stop, and it will crunch in. Eventually it'll hit here, and that's when it breaks. Now this container itself doesn't have a kind of max or min control for it, but we could add one in. We could add in, let's say, just some minimum value, which, let's say we go up to here, we add that minimum, we add a variable, and let's add in our minimum of 360. So now it's a 360, won't get any smaller, can get a little bigger. There we go. So we can control for that. Obviously, if you have more granular controls, it make it a little bit easier, but there you go. And we know that the minimum, for example, here on this would be by, let's say we go fill, but we're going to make sure that there's a minimum, and let's go set that minimum, and let's set it as that there. And then what we can do is we can actually use the spacing, like an auto spacing now, which allows us to basically have this where it can have your auto spacing go all the way out, all the way in, and life is good. We can also put a maximum value down, and this is where like more of your granular controls will start to come in, be a lot more helpful. But let's just say that we don't want it to go beyond 800. And if we do that, it should ideally, let's say, be centered. That'd be nice. And that means that if I was to expand it, I can't make it any more than 800. And as you can see, we got this one. So overall, we now have actual some controls. It will control the size, and it also controls the size here on the smaller one. So I can put in the screen, for example, like if I put this on the screen down here, I can pin it to the bottom, left and right. I'm just going to grab that screen, duplicate it, and let's set that as an auto layout. And I'm going to set this where it sits at the bottom, and I'm going to make sure that it fills the screen. And there we go. When it gets too big, it will eventually expand all the way out, but it will stop at a particular point, which is really helpful. This is probably way too much. That being said, you would keep it smaller and you would fix it further in, and it will continue to respond to the frame, which is fantastic. But as the frame gets too small, it will stop and will go and respect the max and min sizes. There we go. So now we have the controls, we got that one, we got the max and min on this one. We do technically also have it in the, we do technically haven't added the buttons, but we can't, I think, or do we? Yeah. Let's select, what we can do is that let's select the button text, double check, yep, we got it there. Okay, in this scenario, if we put too much more, as you can see, it scales over, it doesn't exceed that number, and it will stop and respect the boundary of what you put in for the text. Same thing for this here. If we kept typing, it will respect the boundary that you set and will stop, like basically adding in more text there as well. And this helps, this actually is quite helpful, especially, for example, if we just didn't have this boundary. So if you didn't have the boundary, it will allow you the ability to, we'll have to actually technically fill. And if this, of course, breaks the boundary of the minimum size of the button, but with that, you can crush, we can't even crush our own buttons here because we put all the controls in. If I remove that, for example, though, let's grab the button and let's remove this no minimum size, none. that's good. 0, yes. Minimum. 0. All right, great. There we go. Now the text realizes and it truncates because it's hitting that size. Like, so that's how we can set up the max and min for controlling the elements inside of our screen. That being said, what we have here is a mobile screen that can technically just go ridiculously huge, and I don't really want that. What I want to make sure is, for example, I won't want this screen to get any bigger than technically, let's say, the height of the screen. So if I didn't want this screen to get any bigger by the height, that's where I can actually put in my max and min controls even on the screen. So at the moment, for example, the width of the screen is 360, and if that was the minimum, I can say add minimum. I can add in my actual minimum. Actually, that will be the wrong min. No, so this will be minimum. I'll need to go minimum, that one. Great. I go to add in my maximum, go to my maximum, add my value, and my maximum will be, let's say, that 800. Like, so now my screen can't get any bigger than the maximum of 800 or the minimum of 360. And that's basically how we can start to control for the sizes of our screens and having basically our elements adjusting to our screens, and then the screens, for example, adapting and adjusting to the actual controls you put inside of it. So I hope this demo goes through and you can understand, you can see the value of having your controls for your max and min size tokens. And just again, just in case you haven't seen those particular ones, the ones that set up, you can have another look. You have your max and you have your min sizes. I hope that this has helped you. Please let me know in the comments section below. I'd love to get your feedback. I'd love to understand if this is working for you, and I'd like to know that basically if there's any other things you're looking for and wanting to understand about scaling tokens, different types of sizing tokens, and different ways to control for them, please let me know in the comment section below. But until next time, design thinkers, keep thinking, keep creating, and keep making amazing things, and I'll see you all in the next video. All right.